Signore e signori, buonasera. Benvenuti alla Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò della New York University. We are delighted to have you here tonight for the presentation of Oro Macht Frei, a documentary about the Jewish community of Rome during the Shoah. And we have the fortune of having with us the writer and producer of the documentary, Campbell, that will be with us for a Q&A after the screening. As you know, this event is part of the series of events organized by Centro, Primo, Levi, the Consulate General of Italy, and the other Italian cultural institutions of New York in observance of La Giornata della Memoria that happens to be tomorrow. It's the day that the Italian Republic and the European community have decided to choose to commemorate the Shoah. And it's the day in which the Soviet army liberated the extermination camp of Auschwitz. In observance of that, tomorrow, as is already a tradition in New York, the names of the about 6,000 Italian Jews that were exterminated in the camps will be read in front of the Consulate General of Italy on Park Avenue here in New York. It's a very important, it's a very somber occasion that is observed with great solemnity and simplicity at the same time. And I invite all of you to participate. You can either sign up to read the names or simply be there and with your presence participate in the event. This year, here at Casa Italiana, we have two events. We have tonight the screening of the documentary, and we'll talk more about it afterwards. And then on February 1st, we're going to have the presentation of Manuela Consonni's book, L'Eclisse dell'Antifascismo. That is a very, very important book that talks about the interrelation between fascism, anti-fascism, the resistance, and in particular the contribution of the Italian Jewish community to the resistance and the moment of transition between fascism and the Italian Republic and the democracy in Italy. So please mark your calendar for that event as well. A full list of all the events celebrating the Giornata della Memoria can be found on the website of the Centro Primo Levi here in New York. We have here with us Alessandro Cassin that will be on the stage with me to help me with the Q&A with Campbell at the end of the movie. The movie lasts about 1 hour and 10 minutes, about 70 minutes, and I will see you after that. Thank you very much. As we said at the beginning, now we have a chance to have a Q&A with Campbell, who is one of the producers of the film. Please welcome Campbell. Alessandro, vieni su anche tu. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to screen this documentary here at the Casa because we have to reveal some behind the scenes. The involvement of Catherine in this documentary took place here at the Casa. She responded to an ad. They were simply looking for a translator, and they ended up with a producer, consultant, interviewer, and many other things. And it was at the time in which Catherine was studying here for her doctoral studies, concentrating in medieval and Renaissance Italian, and she ended up making these documentaries. So it's a reason of particular pride for us here at the Department of Italian Studies at Casa Italiana that somehow Catherine's involvement with the project was born here. So congratulations, Catherine, for this great job that took you, that made you very busy for quite a long time, much more than you expected. And just simply tell me how you got an interest in this topic, and maybe a bit about la gestazione, the making of the documentary, how much time you spent in Italy, how did you find the people that were interviewed, these kind of things.
Thank you, Stefano, and I just want to thank the Primo Levi Center and Natalia and Alessandro and the Casa Italiana and Stefano for hosting this event tonight. in honor of the Day of Memory in Italy, and I'm so grateful that we can show our film here. And it is a special emotion for me to present this creation at the Casa. As Stefano was saying, I was here when I responded to the ad because I was looking for a job, I was interested immediately in the subject because they were looking for a translator, for somebody to translate these interviews of Roman Jews, and it basically just said, this is World War II Holocaust subject, and you'll be translating Roman Jewish testimony from Italian to English. And I was like, I have to get this job. And I did everything I could get. It was pouring rain, and I showed up soaking wet, and just sat there. I was like, give me this job. And I got it. But yeah, it started off as an idea. Joel Markel, the executive producer, was traveling in Rome in a tour. He was traveling the ghetto of Rome and the synagogue and the offices, and he heard the story of the gold extortion. And as he describes it, it was the first time he heard his mother, as you read or might remember reading at the beginning, his mother's survivor, a Hungarian survivor of Auschwitz. So he grew up, intensely, intimately familiar with this subject, and had always wanted to do something to honor his mother's story. But it often struck him that it was hard as it was hard in his relationship with her, to feel a more close and understanding of what had happened to her, because she was kind of quiet and stoic about it. Being there in the Roman Jewish community and hearing the story of the gold extortion, for some reason it just started to light up all of these lights in his mind about the reality that took place there, this community coming together to save fellow members of the community, with this gesture of showing up and giving what little you had. I mean, times of war, that little bit of gold is, if you had it and you hadn't sold it, it was because it was so precious, right? So all of this really struck a feeling of familiarity for him. He's from Brooklyn. He's not Italian, but he felt very, very close to the community, and he had this idea this would make a great documentary. Also, to take the number of millions of Jews that were killed down to something intimate and communal, and these are real people. So to take a number into something familiar. He came back to New York and spoke to his friend Jeff, the director, and the two of them set out making connections in Italy, and they started at the museum, the Jewish Museum of Rome. And from there they met Laura Supino, who I guess she was a volunteer at the museum, and she herself also has testimony. She didn't want to be in the film, but she, like many Roman Jews, all have, this is their story, so she took them around and got them to meet a number of testimonies, which is not an easy thing to do, by the way, to find people that are willing to sit for a couple hours and dig up all of this, to complete strangers, Americans from New York. It's intimate for them. Anyway, but they did manage to get these interviews. There were about 8 at the time. And the ones that are included here of that first trip are Piero Terracina, who is a survivor, Auschwitz survivor. Miriam Varon, who is the lovely lady who was saved by princesses, and convents, and just lovely lady. Trying to remember who the other person from that first batch Letizia Terracina. Anyway.
And
yeah.
You actually carried out these interviews?
I did it. This was the first.
In one instance,
yeah,
your voice.
Yeah, that's me with Pacifico.
And everything else is.
Yeah.
But it was
Well, they did the first round. They brought these interviews back, and then I started working, translating them. And I'm coming from NYU. I'm coming from like every single word they say matters, right? And they wanted me to just summarize it and be brief, which obviously I can't do. But no, really, they wanted me to just summarize their testimonies. I was like, every single word they're saying is fabric of their soul, right? Of this experience, of this memory, of the city itself. We can't lose this, so I'm not gonna make this short. I'm gonna give you word for word. And so they were hoping that they would just, hire me for like $100 and, an interview or something. And so 2 months later, I was done translating these interviews. I mean, and doing a lot of research to really understand. I hadn't studied this particular history before, so I do a lot of research just to understand what their references were and so on and so forth. By the time I was done, the director was like, "Would you come on as producer and take over this project?" And that's where I started, got involved with the interviews of...
Let me just
yeah.
interject. I mean, what you were just saying about trying to save every little word because if that meant something important. I think that, you know, as we're celebrating the 16th year of this Giorno della Memoria, what has happened even since the movie is that the majority of these people that she interviewed or that you see in the movie are have died or are dying. So, you know, you start a project and you know, like any documentary, you start defining really the goal of the movie as you go along. And I think that what's extraordinary about this movie is that it really captured the end of a time when, you know, direct testimony could be given on these facts. And I think you simply could not do this movie in 5 years, and you probably couldn't do it today. So I just thought that's...
Absolutely. I think we should have some questions from the audience.
Wait, I just wanted one more detail. I'll be really brief. It was in trying to tell this story, we realized that none of the interviews that we had had up to that point were actually voices from, they were not from the ghetto itself, which was the first and largest, where the roundup began, it was the largest portion of the people that were deported. So we reached out to Grazia Di Veroli, we reached out to this woman that we met through a friend of Joel's, and Grazia agreed to help us because Alessandro Portelli, Alexander Steele, the scholar and historian and amazing fellow that is familiar with the Casa Italiana, the Primo Levi Center, who is at Columbia University, who will be presenting on Thursday night for these events as well, right? He wrote a book called Benevolence and Betrayal, which if any of you have read that, yeah. So the third of the 5 stories, it's 5 Roman Jewish families during fascism and Nazism, right, in Italy. Not Roman Jewish, excuse me, Italian Jewish. Anyway, they're the 3rd family, her family. So when she heard that Alec is interviewed, is researched in that book. So she heard that we were doing this film and that Alexander, I keep saying that.
Alexander Steele.
Thank you. Steele was part of this film. She was like, oh, okay, he interviewed my father, he interviewed my uncle. It was close. This is her family. These are people. You can't just like come from New York and be like, hey, we're going to tell you. Filmmaking. It's not. This isn't a documentary, which you can probably tell, that is going to be like, It's not. It's not for quickness. It's for depth, of feeling. That's how I feel about it, anyway. And hope, and research and. To be solid, to care about and protect the history around this testimony. But I just wanted to add it. So we were able to go back because Grazia was there. She helped us, and she got Pacifico and Settimio and her mom.
That provided the experience from within the
ghetto. And then it helped us piece together this picture because you have people from the ghetto, you have people from outside in the periphery, and all these people were targeted, and so there's a
Yes, ma'am.
It was great that the subtitles were in yellow because it made it much easier to read. Students of Italian film all know the film Oro Macht Frei by I think Carlo Lizzani.
Yes.
But young people in Italy today growing up, do they know this story?
wow. If they watch, I think that, I don't know, you could probably speak to this better than I could, but I can say that our film is being used to teach at least Roman high school students about this history. Is Carlo Lizzani's film? Probably, I think they still run it on television, at least.
No, I just meant
This story, this history.
Well, we have to say that, if I may, Catherine, that the Giornata della Memoria is in its 16th year, right?
The year 2000 it started.
It started in the year 2000. So even, I'm not saying that before the Giornata della Memoria these issues were not studied, but since it has been institutionalized, I mean, I think we celebrated more in New York because instead of a giornata, we have 10 days basically
A month
of events in different institutions. But I have to say that since the President of the Italian Republic signed into law the observance of the Giornata della Memoria, all schools in Italy have programs on these dates. So tomorrow, basically, you can be sure that in all the schools of Italy, in one way or the other, documentaries are shown, people are interviewed, students participate in activities and organize activities. So if sometimes discussing, especially with Alessandro and Natalia and our friends at the Consulate, and I would like to thank the Consul General of Italy, Natalia Quintavalle, for her presence here tonight, and also for continue to spearhead the Giornata della Memoria as her successors did, and really believing in it and underlining the importance of this day. And thanks to Consul General Quintavalle, for example, we have the presence of other diplomats from other nations tomorrow that will come to the consulate. So it's not only something that belongs to the Italian community, but thanks to the network of the diplomatic world here in New York, it's extended to everybody. And not only European, you have colleagues from many other countries all over the world that come to pay homage. But to go back to your question, yes. The Giorno della Memoria brings into the school all the schools of Italy to start, and then there are also ceremonies. I come from a small town, 4,000 people, but every year on January 27th, there is a small celebration at the local Jewish cemetery and at City Hall, in which somebody is called to speak or there is a program presented. So we might have some doubts on how to memorialize these things, on how to observe these things, but they also serve a purpose. And then you can discuss how it is studied, how it is celebrated, but it definitely is a part of the national discourse, also
yes.
Thanks to this.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely right. The Giorno della Memoria changed things dramatically in Italy. However, this particular story, the story of the gold of Rome, is a very, very well-known episode, and kids in schools in Rome, whether Jewish or not, absolutely know about this and knew about this before the Giorno della Memoria. Giorno della Memoria really brought it to a whole other level. However, as much as people think they know the story, I think that this movie tells it in an extraordinary way, particularly because it's based on interviews. So, you know, what happened that day, what happened in that period, you could read it in a book. But I think that the emotional impact of hearing these people who remember it is totally different. And as you just saw, I mean, the difference between this movie and L'Oro di Roma really creates a completely different emotional space for the spectator to try to really imagine what happened.
Yes. Do we have other questions? Sir.
I'm sorry, you're losing me. What is the significance of January 27th?
It's the day in which the Soviet army liberated Auschwitz. So that's the day that it was a European community decision to pick this date to observe the Day of Memory. So the day in which the Shoah is commemorated. There are doubts about why this date and not others. Personally, talking about Rome, I think that in Italy, for example, the day of October 16th, 1943, should be the day that we observe because it was the major roundup of Jews in Italy. And also because observing the Shoah, the day in which the camp was liberated, it somehow is self-absolution on the parts of everybody, saying we remember that it ended more than we remember it existed.
It was a complex decision. I mean,
yeah.
When the law was approved in the year 2000, the senator who brought the law about, Furio Colombo, had suggested October 16th as the day. But then they wanted to uniform it with other European countries, and Germany and France had already picked January 27th, so it was felt that this could become a continent-wide or worldwide day of celebration, or of remembrance, rather.
Ma'am.
Yeah, what I particularly also liked about your documentary was the embedding into the history of Nazism in Italy, and so My question is more, the Jewish ghetto now in Rome is maybe the most touristed area next to the Colosseum or so. If I'm correctly, there are not many plaques really commemorating that story. I don't remember it. And I'm there 2 or 3 times a year. Do I miss it? Or
Well, I mean, you actually saw a couple of them in the film, but there are some plaques, but it's not, it's low key. And speaking of low, if you do walk around the ghetto, but also anywhere around the city, you might find a gold brick. And the gold bricks are, the San Pietrini of Rome are the cobblestone of Rome is very specific and very beautiful. And so what's beautiful about this is that these are Romans, Jewish Romans that were taken right from their home, and they were lost to us. And but they've is it, I don't know if it's gold or brass or probably brass, yeah. It's beautiful commemoration for the families, and each year, like Pacifico just received one like last year or 2 for his dad. I have this beautiful photo of him holding the brick, and then they have a whole ceremony of putting it in the ground, and they usually do it in front of where the person lived.
Pietre d'inciampo is what they call them in Italy.
Stumbling stones. Sir.
First of all, wonderful documentary. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
My question had to do with the racial laws. I didn't fully understand what happened to the children when they were booted from school, but then they ended up somewhere else. I didn't fully understand that.
It's 2 different things. It's a little bit complicated. So the racial laws excluded Jewish children from public school. Like what they were showing here about the different entrants, if that's what you're referring to, is that when the kids were told that they couldn't go back to school, they were also ushered out separately. But basically, from the fall of 1938, Jewish kids just could not attend school. So eventually, Jewish communities organized alternative teaching, kind of semi-private schools, and that was it. I mean, they were just expelled from schools, and it was not reinstated.
And Alessandro, what Liliana Picciotto says about these Jewish schools, we have to say first of all that Jewish kids in Italy, all before the racial laws, all went to public schools. That was the big unifying factor after the unification of Italy, was the experience of the public schools. There were few public schools in Italy, and there were Catholic schools. So the experience of the public schools is really what bound everybody together. When the Jewish kids were expelled from the public schools, Jewish teachers also were expelled from the public schools. So the Jewish communities in each city organized their own schools. The good thing is that there was no lack of great Jewish teachers and professors. So many testimonies go in the direction of people that were in junior high school or elementary school studying with very famous university professors that happened to be Jewish and that were employed by the local community to give classes to these kids who ended up receiving a first-class education and really becoming much more aware of their identity than they had ever been, because of the fact that they were together with other Jewish kids and before they were with all the other ones. So there is this double-edged component in the experience of the Jewish kids after the expulsion from the public schools. Sir.
This documentary has a lot of depth because you interviewed some survivors, and that's great. In your opinion, what is the most difficult part of putting together a documentary of this magnitude?
Oh, bless your heart. That's the most difficult part. Well, I'll tell you one thing that was really difficult. There's a lot of things that were difficult. One was the decision how to talk about the Vatican's response to the deportations. It was very, very difficult. How to not overwhelm the film with that subject. So keeping the tenor, staying close to our testimonies, and not letting their story get drowned out once again by something else that seems like and it is an extremely important, but that's another documentary, right? That specific subject. But what I like about it being present, it is because it is very, very important to this community, this subject. So the history of the Roman Jews and the Vatican and the Catholic Church is what do they call? They're called the Pope's Jews. They call themselves that. So even their community is in sometimes very conflictual, sometimes very symbiotic relationship with the Catholic Church there in Rome. So I think that to see one of the things that I think, how do I say this? Like one of the things that I kept in mind in putting all of this together is I thought of Rome itself. I just kept thinking of Rome itself as a city with diverse voices and diverse perspectives, and a magnificent city for that diversity. So if we let these voices speak about their experience and like I was saying before, the fabric of the soul of Rome, that their stories are Roman stories. And so also the presence of the church and the church's response is also part of that. And yes, we had an interview with Sister Maria Pucci, who has an interesting testimony of having helped Jews in her convent. But some things just felt a little jarring. Like if we were to put all of that other testimony in, it just would have felt a little, to me it felt jarring. So the question is how to stay close to your subject and not have it implode in on itself and be too provincial. How to stay connected to the larger context that it's connected to. Also,
I must say that one of the strong points of this documentary to me is the way they really did it. It took a long time to do it. And I was privileged to see different versions of this documentary. So I think that the real advantage was that they filmed initially, they came back, they thought about it, and then they got advice on who might else be interviewed. They went back. And so this whole process of looking at the material, editing, doing some preliminary editing, and then going back and finding new scholars and new people to ask the questions and to put together the history, I think it's really what makes it so special.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if any of the people who were interviewed were Gentiles. Were they all Jews? And if they were, how come you didn't bring in some of the other people who were resisting at the time? I know this might be another.
Thank you for your question. There's so many stories, yeah. Right. Right, because I really wanted to stay close to their story, from their community, their history and memory. It's a very difficult choice because there are so many amazing stories that tether into and are all a part of this. So I think that absolutely, there's the story of the resistance. There's the story of like we were saying before, from the perspective of the Catholics, and the nuns and everything. There's so many stories, and I think that's the thing too. Is Rome? This time in Rome, as you begin to study and listen to all the different testimonies from this time, you will find there's so much information, and I guess that's the point, is to not overwhelm. And to have it be their story so that we stay close to their memory. And again, it's not just one memory. That's why we have people from different backgrounds and different experiences. We even have some conflicting messages in there. I don't know if you picked up on it, but there's conflicting experience. There's some people, for example, they talk about hiding in convents, that it was humiliating. Some had to pay to stay there. Some were we're grateful and we're able to have a positive experience out of it and have nothing but gratitude for that experience. There's a lot of conflict there. We didn't want to diminish that complexity by we didn't want to diminish complexity, and we didn't want it to be too complex, you know? So you have to finding that. I mean, that's what part of what was hard. The other thing that was hard was footage, by the way. There's like no footage of this time period, especially in Rome. And by the way, there's no existing, I mean, in this film, I don't know if you remember seeing Letitia's talking about on October 16th when the SS goes up the elevator with the door woman, and her mom has hidden her safely in the basement, has gone back upstairs to get her medicine because she's got like some really serious illness. And she doesn't see the elevator, so she takes the stairs, and the SS has gone up with the door woman. And they chop down the door. That image is, as far as I know, the only existing image from October 16th, from that day, about the Nazi aggressions to the Jews. The only one. And the only reason that we know that it exists, is because one of our researchers went to Letitia's house. We were looking for photos of her brother, because she talks about her brother at Vietasso, age 14. She gives us photos of him at age 40, which is fine. It's confusing. But and then she's like, I don't know if you'll be interested in this, but you might find this interesting. And she takes this shoebox down from the back behind her, you know, all the stuff in her closet, and she pulls out this. It's not even a photograph. It was like some sort of
Contact sheet?
a piece of glass or something. It was this weird thing. I don't know. Her father was a photographer at the time. He loved cameras, and he loved collecting goofy cameras and everything. And he probably sold everything he had, but he had that one camera. He came home looking for his family, because he had gone into hiding earlier, and he came back looking for them, and he shot a photo of that door. And that thing, whatever it is that she has.
It looks like a glass negative.
Yeah, it's like a glass negative. Was in that shoebox, and she just, because no one had asked her, she just hadn't taken it down out of the closet. And when our researcher, I think it was Rivka Spizzichino, when she was there, she was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. This is, I mean, nobody has seen any photos from October 16th. So, and that's why we left it a little bit longer on the screen, so you could like kind of take that in for a second.
That's one of the things that went through my mind. How could that picture not be a setup done many years after the fact? I guess I'm very cynical.
Oh.
How could that be? How could that have been an original photo? And that is amazing.
Yeah.
Right, it is amazing.
And having to do without a lot of footage. In some cases, we did have to use things that were related, but not exactly, you know, about Rome, for instance. And
One last question, yes?
Yeah, I noticed in the credits there was a association of ex-deportati, and I was wondering, what does that association do, and how many are left in it? And, you know, what, I mean, do they gather? Do you know?
Anid, you're talking about.
Yeah, Anid, yeah.
What does it do now?
Yeah.
Well, you know, there were a lot of people deported from Italy who were not Jews. That association includes all people who were deported from Italy in Italian territory. So it was, you know, a very, very large number of people. So initially when it was formed, it was some kind of financial assistance, helping them find jobs, get their life back together. And then it kept going, trying to remember this common terrifying experience. And they've been very active. They've done a lot of things.
Aned right now uses this film to teach about the experience in Rome during the Holocaust, so, and the racial laws and everything.
Film available, because I teach at Nassau Community College, and we have a Jewish Studies Association, and we would definitely be interested in having it in some way. Is it available?
You can talk to me after.
Right. Thank you very much for your question. One very, very last question. The lady there, I don't want to take away the possibility to ask your question.
Amazing job, and one of the things that I really appreciated, and it might have gone past people because it went kind of quickly, but how important it was that it was mostly the women who were deciding to go into hiding right after October 16th. We have
I don't know if that's statistically a fact. However, there were a lot of women who did that, but I think that the conflict was that the Jewish leadership, as the film says, did not want to scare the population, so they kept on giving reassuring messages. So the men would listen to the leaders who were telling them not to leave.
Probably the men were listening to the leaders and the women were listening to their guts.
Right.
And they were right.
As often.
There's just like another practical reason why the women might have been kind of spearheading that is because a lot of the men and young men were in hiding because of the military occupation. So they could have been picked up off the street to go do some work. I mean, there was a lot of fear, particularly when they came knocking on the doors on October 16th, a lot of people thought, oh, they're here for the men, Some of them sent the men up on the roofs to escape, and the women stayed behind with the kids and the elderly, and those were the ones that were taken, a lot of the times, but anyway.
Well, I would like to thank you all again for being here tonight. I remind you, tomorrow, the observance of the Giornata della Memoria at the Consulate General of Italy on Park Avenue and 68th Street, beginning at 9 a.m. until all the names are read. And once again, thank you so much to Catherine Campbell and congratulations for this great documentary. Grazie.